The sea reaches deep into the land on this part of Newfoundland's east coast. It is a rare environment where thick forests meet the North Atlantic Ocean along hundreds of kilometers of sheltered bays. Whales come to feed in these rich waters. Monoliths of ice can be seen well into the summer. On land, nutrient-poor bogs support meat-eating plants, while the forest is home to a disappearing species. The baymen who lived here harvested both the forest and the sea. From Ochre Hill, a stump of an ancient volcano in Terra Nova National Park, the view east is of an ancient land carved and worn by glaciers. Long reaches of the ocean called sounds run deep into the heart of the park. To the west is the park's interior, also a result of glaciation. Gentle, rolling hills are covered in a mixture of old and new growth, and rivers and streams continue to carve wider paths for themselves in their journey to the sea. The easternmost of Canada's national parks, Terra Nova National Park lies at the end of Newfoundland's Bonavista Bay. Established in 1957, less than 10 years after the island joined Confederation, it was the 18th park created by the National Parks System. Terra Nova covers 400 square kilometers, with 200 kilometers of coastline. The Trans-Canada Highway runs right through Terra Nova National Park, but an inattentive motorist could still miss the essence of the place completely. It is the interaction between the boreal forest and the saltwater inlets reaching deeply into the land like fingers of the sea that make this park interesting. And for those who take time to search out the details of this land-sea relationship, it can be a very rewarding experience. The tranquil shorelines of much of the park look like they belong to freshwater lakes. But these quiet bays are part of the Atlantic Ocean, salty as the open sea. Along the shoreline, water levels and temperatures change drastically every day, making these intertidal zones harsh environments. But the rocks make perfect homes for periwinkles and strange-looking barnacles. This is a feeding ground for thousands of black-backed and herring gulls that nest here, raising their young. Many other birds and animals benefit from the intimate relationship of the ocean and the forest along these coastlines. The majestic bald eagle is a classic feeder. Nesting at water's edge, it makes a living from the riches of the sea. Icebergs play an important part in the ecology of these waters, but they begin life inland, far to the north.
This is an absolutely wonderful place to come to view icebergs, the east coast of Newfoundland. The icebergs itself start as a glacier in places like Greenland and Baffin Island. And in that area, they actually calve off into the ocean, and hence an iceberg is born. And then it starts 2 to 3 year migration before it gets to Newfoundland. Now, the iceberg itself is fresh water, and this is what amazes people. One time, I actually took a chunk of iceberg and I broke it up in little pieces, and I put it in people's drinks, and they said, "We can drink this?" You absolutely can. It's fresh water that started as a glacier.
The water in these icebergs may be fresh, but it's also old, frozen 10 to 12,000 years ago. Now the melting ice creates upswellings of plankton and other nutrients that attract fish and whales. The nutrient-rich water off the shores of Terra Nova National Park is filled with hundreds of unusual species. To bring the wonders of the ocean to visitors, the park has come up with some interesting new ideas. They've set up an underwater camera in the ocean and have put a TV monitor in the new Marine Interpretive Center. In addition, there is a touch tank that replicates the hidden underwater environment that few can otherwise experience.
We've taken a part of the ocean environment and brought it inside. And it works because we have water being pumped right from the ocean, right into our tank, and then it flows back to the ocean again.
The park releases the underwater animals on a regular basis, though while in the tank they appear to live as they would in the ocean. Buried in the sand, a moon snail hunts for clams.
And this thing is got to be one of the slimiest creatures in the world, and it has to have this slime. This is very important to it because you can see where it lives. It burrows through the sand, and sand is gritty. It wouldn't have any body lift if it wasn't for this slime. And what they do down in the sand, they'll actually burrow down in the sand and they'll look for clams. And when they find a clam, they engulf the clam completely with that huge foot on the bottom, and then they drill a hole in the shell and suck the insides out and then spit the clam out again.
The park has also formed an alliance with a local tour boat company, which not only takes people out to watch whales, but also gives them a more scientific glimpse of the waters beneath the boat.
We're going to do a vertical tour, so we're going to get a whole array of animals right from the surface right the way down to 120 feet. You know, we tend to think of the whales as the action and our eagles, but in fact, the smaller animals, that's where the action is. Down in the ocean, that's where the action's happening.
Plankton is the primary food source in the ocean. 100,000 phytoplankton, which is plankton that uses photosynthesis to produce food, will feed 10,000 zooplankton, like this small creature. 10,000 of these will feed 1,000 herring, and 1,000 herring will feed 10 codfish.
The ocean is an incredibly exciting place because it's one of those places where there's so much life. There's just so many different things that are out there that I've never even seen before, never even heard of. It's almost like something out of a science fiction movie. So it's always an exploration and of discovery for sure.
Marine tour guides are usually concerned only with the large creatures visible at the surface. So it was an unexpected pleasure to be given a glimpse of these tiny but equally important creatures at the low end of the food chain. Long before Terra Nova National Park was created, Bonavista Baymen understood the benefits of having a forest so close to the ocean. Loggers could use the sea to transport timber, and several sawmills operated here. In the summer of 1927, the King brothers began sawing lumber here in Minchin Cove, which is now part of the park. It was hard work. Trees were cut by hand in the winter and dragged out to the mill by horse, oxen, or just manpower. Typical of other mills in the area, this was a family affair, with everyone pitching in. In the summer, the lumber was cut and loaded onto ships bound for St. John's. Today, only rusting remnants of the mills remain. The logging did have an effect on the forests here, but cutting was on a small scale. Today, there is a good mixture of old and new growth. The original focus of the park was on the interior, a varied landscape of boreal forest, bogs, ponds, barrens, and hills. The trails through the park have a slightly different feel. Newfoundland is missing many of the most common animals that live on the mainland. There are no skunks, raccoons, or porcupines. In fact, when the Aboriginals arrived, there were only 14 species of mammals. Moose were introduced to the island less than a century ago. With the absence of many of their natural predators, the moose population has increased dramatically. They are now the most abundant large land mammal here. In Terra Nova, moose are often found along the roadside between dusk and dawn, and that has been a problem for the park. The Trans-Canada Highway cuts through the middle of Terra Nova, and vehicles in transit hit an average of 20 moose each year.
That's a fairly dangerous collision. I mean, you're traveling in a car at 100 kilometers an hour. You're hitting an animal which is probably in the range of 1,000 pounds. You can imagine running into a brick wall.
To find out why moose were drawn to the highways and to see if moose vehicle collisions could be avoided, Terra Nova National Park and the Provincial Wildlife Division undertook a study. Waiting for winter, when animals are easier to track, scientists used a helicopter to locate 10 moose. Then, colleagues on the ground darted the animals with tranquilizers. They then fitted them with radio collars in order to follow their movements.
Moose are incredibly intelligent, adaptive animals. The animals that we collared, which were in effect animals that lived in and around the highway corridor, none of them were hit by vehicles. Those animals seem to have learned to avoid vehicles, and the animals that are being hit are animals that are either young animals that are traveling through the area, dispersing, looking to establish their own home range, or they're older animals which for some reason or another have moved and are traveling across a number of home ranges or across a piece of habitat.
The park continues to search for new ways to reduce the chances of moose wandering onto the Trans-Canada. Meanwhile, all they can do is try to educate and warn the traveling public. At the other end of the wildlife management spectrum in the park is the rather shy Newfoundland pine marten. The marten is a key predator near the top of the food chain in old-growth forests here, and there are only 300 of the Newfoundland variety left. A lethal combination of logging and trapping has taken a large toll, so that now the Newfoundland marten is considered an endangered species. The marten was reintroduced to Terra Nova in the early 1980s. In 1990, it was decided to monitor all marten in the province to see how the species might be helped to recover.
Perfect day, John. We should pick up those animals today. Probably you should check that antenna there and make sure the connections are tight.
Okay.
Resource Conservation Officer John Goss is overseeing the marten project in Terra Nova. It is vital for Goss to know more about the elusive marten's behavior, what habitat it likes, and the extent of its range. This will help the park make decisions about locating campsites and trails. So Goss and park staff have radio collared 5 marten and monitor their movements by radio telemetry. Each week, Goss and his pilot take to the air to locate the tiny creatures.
We have 2 females collared, and they're using an area of about 10 to 15 square kilometers, and the males are using an area of about twice that area. It's a fairly large home range in comparison to marten on the mainland of North America.
It looks like we found frequency 8510, John. That one was right at Salton's Marsh. And we still haven't found frequency 8550, the one we were missing now.
Sometimes John tries to locate the marten on foot to check on its condition.
The work that we're doing this spring, we were interested in determining whether the females had reproduced, and from what we can tell, neither of the 2 females had a litter. There was quite a bit of movement during this time, and we assume that if they did have a litter, they would be more localized and would stay around the den area.
Scientists estimate that a viable marten population for Terra Nova would be about 50 animals. With no more than 10 now in the park, the continued good health and successful breeding of even 2 of them can be critical. Rivers rush through Terra Nova National Park on their way to the sea. These fast-moving waters are in contrast to the stagnant bogs found in the park's higher ground. Bogs form when rain and meltwater fill depressions in the bedrock hollowed out by glaciers. But since they are on high ground, little water flows into them, and they become stagnant and nutrient-poor. Decaying plants become domes of peat that can have centers up to 5 meters above the surrounding land. Chief Park Interpreter Gayleen Irwin, who came here from Vancouver Island, took us on a squishy adventure called bog slugging.
A bog is like a giant sponge. The sphagnum is one of the main components of the bog, and it holds a lot of water. It may look dry, but the amount of water that it retains is just amazing.
Bogs have a surprising variety of vegetation. You have to look very hard to spot this curly grass fern. This Arethusa, or dragon's mouth orchid, is an easier find.
This one's Labrador tea.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can tell that one by turning the leaves over, and you can see they just have a sort of a woolly backing to it.
Mm-hmm.
And this one you can make into a tea. Once your water is boiling, you can throw your leaves in and then pull your water off the heat and let it steep in it, because otherwise there are toxins that come out, and it's known as nature's X-lax. If you make a mistake and don't find that woolly backing on the leaf, and you use this by mistake, this one actually is quite poisonous. The sheep laurel, or lamb's kill. The whole area is just filled with small shrubs and small plants.
Eating protein-rich insects is one way plants make up for the lack of nutrients in the bog. The pitcher plant attracts insects with its red mouth. Once in, they can't climb out and are digested by the plant. This spider seems to know that the pitcher plant will be attracting insects and is building her web across its mouth.
There are so many secrets and things to discover, and you don't see it from the highway. You have to get out in the boat, out in the water, and really start to turn things over and look under the leaves and discover what's really here. And I guess that's what I find fascinating about Terra Nova National Park is it's not just all laid out for you. You have to take time and discover it.
When Terra Nova became a national park in 1957, it was hardly pristine wilderness. It had been logged extensively, for one thing, but an old-timer told us that cutting was highly selective and that the timber was skidded out by horse, oxen, and even by hand. The forest was never clear-cut, and it shows. The new growth is getting old again.